Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second round of our Sunday matches for the Victory Road World Cup of Pokémon VGC. My name is Mabel Rourke. I am psyched to finally be back on the mic with David. It's been at least, I feel like, a year now, so really exciting for me to be back. I picked a Lunala pin, and that was honestly just a guess, and I'm glad that that's paid out well for me. But David, let's talk about the end of that game too a little bit, because that almost felt like a preview of Series 13 with all four restricteds on the field at once.
It was actually, yeah. And it felt like everyone just wanted to bring as much power as possible. We had the Charizard, we had Kartana with its sky high attack as well, and then Grimmsnarl Incineroar. But loads of power, loads restricted. So
indeed, he was taking knockouts. Yeah, everybody was going in on it. So incredibly fun match, of course, for me to watch. It's really interesting for me to be seeing Lunala popping up more towards the end of Series 12, because it wasn't exactly a restricted that we saw as much kind of towards the beginning, a little bit closer to March and April when events were starting to come back. I think it was more focused on Swordfish and Zacian Groudon, matches like that. However, Lunala feels like a nicer, bulkier option versus something like that Calyrex Shadow Rider that we're seeing paired with Groudon, because Lunala can at least take one ghost type attack and then, still hang on for a bit, whereas Calyrex Shadow Rider may be forced down into a Focus Sash if need be. But we are going for our second matches with João, Henrique, and Fredrik Herberg. And from what was a really close set of matches in this group last week, now both of these teams are they're kind of facing, with their two opponents in the United States and Sweden, it's kind of become a lot more lopsided. So Norway currently down 0-5 to Brazil, and also on the opposite side of that group as well, Sweden is currently down, I believe, 5-0 as well to the United States, or 6-0. So both of these teams, Norway and Sweden, both had those 3-5 losses to Brazil and the United States. So now it's getting a little bit tougher, I think, and Norway has a lot of work to do to maybe try and upset the seedings on that top side of the group.
Yeah, and maybe for a little bit of pride as well, and try out a few things for Worlds, and versus some very good players around the world too. So it's still a very much an experience, even though unfortunately Norway and Sweden are already out of contention. But how often does Norway and Brazil kind of face and play each other? Not very much. So, and here is a little spice of that today.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of interesting spice, right? Interesting to see on the Norway side, 4 of the 5 teams that were shown all had Regieleki, which is a Pokemon that I absolutely love, and I love seeing it in competitive, versus 0 Regieleki on the opposite side for Brazil. But a lot of different cores, seeing some Zacian, Yveltal, seeing even the Reshiram with the Calyrex Ice Rider is a team that I think I saw a little bit last week as well, which is one of those teams that's always really fun. It's something that I think can be a little bit more interesting. The core you don't always see when you bring in something like that Reshiram or even that Kyurem. It's not exactly something you prep for, but a little bit more standard, it looks like, on the Brazil side, and you can still see that is leading them very well for this week.
Yeah, I can see that really strongly. Very bulky general teams on that side. Celesteela, lots of Trick Room there, whereas very much the fast kind of mode on Norway's end. But Brazil versus Norway is definitely a match that I've been really looking forward to. I think we had a little bit of experience with it in terms of UK's end last year, and I flew out to Brazil back in 2019 as well, and there were so many great players there. But here is 2 specific of our players as well. We've got João Henrique and Fredrik Herberg, and apologies if I messed up those names. Hopefully at least got 50% of that. So 2021 World Cup competitor top 16 for João. 2020 Players Cup 2 Latin America qualified top 8. Really strong. And the 2021 World Cup competitor on Fredrik's end.
Yeah, so both of these players are familiar with the World Cup format. Norway, actually, this is their first time being in this group stage. They did not make it out of the qualifiers last year, but they did this year, which is a huge accomplishment. They were in that group that had that 3-way tie. So interesting to see kind of as they move forward and what their game plan is moving into another stage of the competition that they weren't yet familiar with. However, both of these trainers have decided to run Groudon and Lunala, so the pin pick was a really good success on my part. However, on Fredrik's side, a little bit different. You're seeing the Incineroar, Venusaur, Umbreon, and the Tornadus And then, excuse me, and then on Joao's side, it is the Charizard, Venusaur, Grimmsnarl, and Incineroar. So Joao running that team that Gavin Michaels ran in Vancouver. I think I've done at least 4 or 5 matches for World Cup with that team. It is truly everywhere. It's something you really have to prep for. Whereas Fredrik is bringing that Umbreon, which is a pick for me that I feel like you're going to be seeing a lot more heading into Worlds in 2 weeks. And, 2 weeks from now, at this exact point, we'll probably be watching the finals of Worlds in London. And, there are a lot of Pokemon between both of these two teams that I'm expecting to see on that final stage.
And what you might think could be potentially a little bit, oh no, not a mirror match, but like Groudon, like Lunala, Incineroar, all kind of don't go for like an exact speed stat, There's always a little bit of like variation. So I don't expect we'll see too many speed ties here. In at least in those common Pokemon that these players have got. Maybe you've still got the max speed on both the Venusaurs with the Focus Sash, which we often do see, but there's still a little bit of like variation in the other Pokemon too. So and potentially those item choices too. Power Herb is pretty common for the Lunar, but the Groudon slot could be a little bit different. Maybe Assault Vest on Joao's end, maybe a White Herb, maybe even like a Citrus Berries as we saw in Game 1. But we're going to go straight for the leads, and it's Thunderous Venusaur at one end and Charizard Grimmsnarl on Joao's end.
Yeah, and this doesn't really give you any sort of insight into that Thunderous, right? You don't really know yet if it is that Pranks or if it's that Defiant, because there's no Intimidate on the opposite side of the field. But you have both of these Sun Abusers, so both of these trainers may be a little bit more hesitant to possibly bring in something like their Groudon here. And if it is that Defiant Thunderous, you could definitely see it going for a Dynamax, going for a Max Airstream to try and keep up with the Charizard on the opposite side of the field, who probably wants to go for something either like a G-Max Wildfire to start getting some good damage off, or a Max Airstream to maybe try and boost the speed, predicting something like that Groudon coming in later and helping that Venusaur just get its speed up. There's a lot of nice options here. And Grimmsnarl, if it is, if it has opportunities to go for something like Trick and maybe slow down that Venusaur even further, I think that could be really huge coming out. Charizard, though, not going to worry about going for a Dynamax. It actually brings in that Groudon. So Groudon here, going to be setting up the Sun, allowing this Venusaur to double its speed thanks to that Chlorophyll, and going to be putting on a little bit more pressure onto that Venusaur slot. But there is going to be a Dynamax from Fredrik's side of the field as well. Most likely going to be that Thunderous, if I'm basing anything off of the color of that Pokeball, as someone who likes to also color match Pokeballs to Pokemon. And it is. So Thunder is coming out here, able to put on a lot of pressure, but it's not going to be able to do nearly as much to this Groudon as it maybe would have liked to the Charizard with something like a Max Airstream. Groudon may be able to handle that a little bit better, but Thunder Wave is the move choice. So Thunder Wave here is going to be their trick to slowing down this Venusaur, maybe stop it from getting off something like a Sleep Powder, and maybe prevent some of that power from the Groudon coming in. Max Airstream into the Grimmsnarl, though, not enough to knock it out, brings it down into the bottom 25% of its HP, and does allow for that speed boost that was, a little bit negated from that Thunder Wave to start kind of racking up again for this Venusaur. So this Venusaur speed tier is kind of all over the place, not getting a full paralysis either, gets that Sleep Powder hit onto that Groudon on Joao's side.
Yeah, that's a big Sleep Powder through the paralysis, through the shaky accuracy, and straight onto a Groudon, which now it has a guaranteed turn of sleep next turn. So a huge momentum swing to Fredrik's end here, be able to get an already very powerful Thunder with that Life Orb revealed, plus the Airstream boost. So Venusaur, even though paralyzed now, is still pretty quick in the Airstream, and there's just one more Airstream coming out for this Thunderous, and it's back to like the speed that it was before, and very fast in the Sun still, which is not going to get contested either. So Fredrik is in a very strong position here. Trick, though, is also coming out from the Grimmsnarl, which is the Iron Ball, so giving that instant speed drop, and there's the Thunder Wave paying dividends. Paralysis there already, but there is the KO still onto this Grimmsnarl with the Max Lightning, and we're setting up the electric terrain now, which is going to maybe mean Venusaur can't throw off too many Sleep Powders anymore.
Yeah, maybe Fredrik saying, I figure that Sleep Powder is no longer going to be a good option for me. A Groudon still, though, going to be taking a little bit of sleep there. Electric Terrain, like you said, it is going to be able to at least boost the power of any more Max Lightnings or any more electric type attacks coming out from that Thunderous. But I do think that it's really interesting that they didn't even go and bother for another Max Airstream, knowing that they're already faster on that side. Venusaur, I think at this point, it's probably just going to have to go for something like a Sludge Bomb, if that's kind of the move that it's going for, if you're assuming a different Venusaur to switch in, or maybe just trying to get some damage off, be a little bit in the way, and provide a little bit of support for the Thunderous on Fredrik's side. But at least the nice thing, too, is you're at least preventing the opposing Venusaur from also going for a Sleep Powder as this Venusaur switches in for Joao.
Yeah, there is the risk here now of Fredrik's end being able to go for that third airstream and the attack from the Venusaur going and then KOing Joao's Venusaur here. But even though Joao's maybe got the jump at the moment, but no, it's the very quick Venusaur right now, already coming out, going straight for the Weather Ball into Fredrik's Venusaur, revealing the Focus Sash, bringing it down to that. Venusaur's not guaranteed to move here at all, thanks to that paralysis a second time. But Thundurus is able to go for another airstream now into the Venusaur, also bringing it down to that Focus Sash. Potentially be on an outspeeded following turn, depending on favorable rolls. But it's still a strong position for Fredrik, but even though the Groudon's asleep, it's still looking pretty healthy.
Yeah, Groudon has not been touched, right, in either of these following Dynamax turns from that Thundurus. And now Thundurus, now out of Dynamax, may not be able to put on as much pressure as it once wanted to. Groudon could wake up if it's carrying something, you know, any sort of rock-type attack, whether that be Rock Tomb or Rock Slide or really anything. It does have the opportunity to put a lot of pressure onto either the Pokemon on Fredrik's side. Precipice Blades, of course, would be great to knock out a Venusaur, but anything is going to knock out a 1 HP Venusaur so long as you can hit it. And that max Airstream, like you said, is pretty effective, at least trying to keep this Venusaur speed tie a little bit closer. And Venusaur on the opposing side, thanks to that Airstream, able to get a Frenzy Plant off, beats that paralysis, hits that Groudon for a ton of super effective damage. But the Weather Ball from the Venusaur on Joao's side is going to be able to be boosted thanks to that Fire typing from the Sun, knock out the Venusaur on Fredrik's side, at least get one Venusaur off of the field, proving that Joao at least has that a little bit extra ability to keep his in. However, Wild Charge is going to do a nice chunk of damage to that Venusaur, that one last remaining HP. You'll only take a teeny amount of recoil and take more damage possibly from something like a Life Orb if that was the case. Groudon, though, takes another turn of sleep that I'm sure it is. You are angrily pounding your desk at that point if your Charizard has slept that long.
Yeah, I think so. So that's unfortunate for Joao there, getting that full turn of sleep, and what is probably maybe a rock move going into the Thundurus there. Didn't see what rock move like Joao has picked here, but it is that Rock Tomb. So not actually would probably be getting a KO on the Thundurus there, and if anything would have lowered its speed, which is already very fast anyway, and it would have proc the Defiant too. So not a huge like blunder there, I suppose, for Groudon to be further asleep, but at least Joao does have his Dynamax still intact, and Thundurus isn't boosted by that Defiant, so it's not gonna be like taking amazing amounts of damage because it's not Dynamax yet, but Charizard is going to take a huge amount from a Life Orb boosted Wild Charge. Fredrik obviously doesn't know really what this Groudon set really is yet. It's probably seen the Assault Vest, but in terms of what rock move it's carrying or any coverage, we still don't know yet. But Joao does go for the Dynamax here on his Charizard, and we still don't even know if it's that, or at least on Fredrik's end, if it's that cheeky weakness policy.
Yeah, Wild Charge into the Charizard does a ton of damage, almost 70%. Does a ton of recoil as well to the Thundurus, and a max Airstream from this Charizard just to kind of boost up these speeds, break this Shadow Shield on this Lunala as well. And like you said, we kind of know this Groudon set. So having that little bit of extra insider info is going to be really huge, because Joao, with this Groudon waking up, is able to go for a Shadow Claw into this Lunala with the broken Shadow Shield. A nice piece of information that you were kind of forced to keep hidden until this Lunala came out. But getting rid of this Lunala before it can go for something like a Meteor Beam, before it can Trick Room and maybe start causing some more problems, as possibly assuming that the Thundurus would get knocked out of the field first. And now also, even with the Sun gone, this may be a little bit more helpful for this Charizard, as it's not taking that Solar Chip damage. Groudon coming back in, though, is going to reassure that. It's going to bring that Sun right back up, will boost the power of something like a G-Max Wildfire, and start once again getting that timer down thanks to that Solar Blade. But now at this point, you can possibly go for something like a Precipice Blades with your own Groudon, or even you can still try and go for a Fire Punch just into that Thundurus, just to get a boosted attack with the Sun up.
Yeah, with Fredrik's Thundurus is still like at +2 speed now, so it's like still outspeeding this Charizard despite the Airstream boost. So Fredrik could pretty confidently just kind of Wild Charge the Charizard and then like go for another attack with his own Groudon. He's still going to worry about what Joao's like rock move is potentially here, because Joao can potentially go for the Max Guard, rock move into the Thundurus, because I don't think Joao's Groudon is necessarily in range of anything from the opposing Thundurus unless it goes for the Fly straight away. But even then, it's not going down that turn. But we actually do see, because of the Iron Ball earlier, which I keep forgetting about, it really comes into play, actually, and like KOs the Groudon despite that. So the speed interaction is like real right now, and something that is been pretty like overlooked at the moment. So the fly does come out though, which does kind of like help with getting around Groudon's attacks, and because it's a Soul Verse, it's probably the fly into that slot. And it does mean Charizard has to whiff an attack into nothing and then has to rely on its inaccurate moves into the following turn. So Fredrik is still very much in it.
Yeah, and this Charizard, right, is getting pretty low with the Sun now brought back in from the Groudon on Fredrik's side. So, you know, if you're able to go for something like that, fly into the Groudon, just get damage off, nice physical damage onto that Groudon, and maybe hope that the solar power chips down this Charizard before it can attack you. Max Guard, though, from the Charizard means that it is just making sure it's not taking any damage from Fly, which actually targeted into the Charizard there. So this means that the slower Groudon with Fire Punch is going to be able to get that target into the Thundurus, thanks to the Sun Boost as well. That is enough to knock that Thundurus out, and that brings the win for João and Brazil's side for Game 1.
Excellently played by João there to preserve the Dynamax to the end with that Charizard, and very keenly using the main way that seems a lot of people seem to deal with Thundurus, which is like tricking something onto it to stop it doing anything. Like we see lagging tail quite a lot because it, despite any airstreams, you can't fight back against it. But Iron Ball providing that instant speed drop and that grounding ability, so your Groudon could hit too, is usually the item of choice on some Groudon Grimmsnarl teams. So it was interesting to see that interaction there, and for the Charizard to just pick up KOs after KOs. But I think, yeah, if Fredrik had maybe like gone for that fly into the Groudon there, got that KO, because Charizard's not going to do anything that turn anyway. Like the most it can get out is the Max Guard. So at least you're then relying on potential solar power chip and then something missing, and then you can potentially take it back.
Yeah, and I mean, that Iron Ball, you and I both overlooked it a little bit there. So once it kind of came back into play and the speed tiers really kind of showed up, it's crazy how important that was. And it kind of makes you feel possibly like Fredrik needs to be more careful of targeting into that Grimmsnarl early, because that Grimmsnarl was able to take, you know, it was able to get that trick off and able to get the Thunder Wave off. So there was a lot of speed control and a lot of pressure coming from that Grimmsnarl early. And if you want to possibly try and go for some more sleeps, like you were able to mitigate really anything that Groudon could do for basically its entire time on the field, except for only, you know, the last few turns at the end. If you're able to maybe go for something like some more sleep powders, maybe if you just force your own, maybe you force a max airstream all 3 turns instead of going for that max lightning on your second turn of Dynamax, then you can possibly at least allow for a little more sleep, allow for your Venusaur to be faster than the opposing one, maybe get some more sleep powders off because there isn't a max lightning coming from the opposite side of the field to maybe stop some more sleeps. Groudon Lunala, though, is going to be the lead here for Fredrik, leading that double restricted combo, and Venusaur Grimmsnarl on the opposite side of the field. So a little bit more shenanigans maybe from this Grimmsnarl if it chooses it, but this Venusaur now already getting to go pretty quick.
Yeah, huge switch up for Fredrik here. So maybe seeing the Iron Ball and how like Thundurus just couldn't get it enough speed to be able to take the game. Fredrik's maybe going, right, let's go the Trick Room route instead. Let's see what happens here. So, which I quite like. Obviously, he's led into something where it's like fairly weak to Sleep Powder. But if you're Sleep Powdering, then you're not dealing a huge amount of damage. So in that way, you can probably still stall out like a Sleep turn immediately and then potentially wake up the following turn. So Fredrik is still looking fairly safe to be able to do what he wants right now. However, Lunala really relies on that Power Herb to be able to hit with Meteor Beam, especially to something like the Charizard, and be able to trick that away on João's end could be quite problematic. However, if the Trick Room does go up, then Groudon with that Rock move and that ground move, it could potentially see a sweep. But instead, we see the switch out into the Incineroar.
Yeah, Incineroar comes in, gets an Intimidate off onto 2 Pokemon that are really not that worried about having that Intimidate as much, but the Fake Out pressure is going to be more important. Sleep Powder into the Incineroar, who avoids it, but Grimmsnarl revealing Foul Play instead of Spirit Break here, able to do super effective damage onto that Lunala, and Lunala able to go for the Trick Room this turn. So now at least this Venusaur is going to be the slowest thing on the field by far, and not getting that Sleep Powder off was huge because it didn't reveal, you know, possibly at first I thought it was safety goggles on that Incineroar.
Yeah, but it is that 25% chance to miss and be very sad if you are João. So, but I like the switch into Incineroar from Fredrik's end because, yeah, you do get to fake out the Grimmsnarl here, which otherwise, especially with the Iron Ball, is going to be the slowest thing on the field right now and could KO the Lunala the following turn. Venusaurs don't often carry the Protect, so it's a fairly safe like fake out and then maybe attack into the Venusaur, kind of chip down from the focus sash that it does have. So he does have an option here, and then potentially with the Groudon in the back, he can then start doing some stuff. Because again, we haven't really seen too much of an interaction between the two speeds. So Lunala is actually the switch out from Fredrik, so not really wanted to contend with the foul play at all, and actually bringing in his own Venusaur in the Trick Room.
Yeah, but I mean, at least your Venusaur is going to be able to handle a foul play better than the Lunala, but a Flare Blitz from the Incineroar in the sun into the Venusaur on the opposing side brings it down to that Focus Sash that we saw earlier. And something I actually really like from Fredrik, right, is that the Lunala on Joao's side did not come last game, so they were able to prep a little bit more for Trick Room, maybe assuming a higher bit of speed, but the Leaf Storm from the Venusaur on Joao's side into the Venusaur on Fredrik's side does very little damage and lowers that special attack by 2 stages. So this Venusaur on Joao's side, kind of a sitting duck at this point.
Yeah, so like even in the Trick Room, the Venusaur switching is like really good right now, because I don't think there's anything like João can do to really deal with it this turn. It's got, you can potentially foul play, and maybe the Sludge Bomb is enough, depending on how much like foul play does to Venusaur, which we have seen, like, but at a -2 Sludge Bomb is probably enough, but then you've still got speed ties likely as well. So Venusaur is still able to maybe go for a Sleep Powder to the Grimmsnarl, which would be very nice to deal with, because then you've got something very much compressing this Grimmsnarl from hitting your Lunala. But we do see that foul play into the Incineroar instead, interestingly, potentially predicting like a switch. And then the KO onto the Venusaur instantly, followed by the Sleep Powder into the Grimmsnarl. So absolutely no KOs going on right now, except for on Joao's end. So he's able to bring in the Groudon, I suppose, but Fredrik's still definitely on the up on this game too.
Yeah, and getting this Grimmsnarl asleep is huge for the Pokemon in the back on Fredrik's side, right? Because he still has that Lunala, which we've seen, but if he lets his own Trick Room time out, then he doesn't have to possibly worry about something like a Thunder Wave. He doesn't have to worry about a Paralysis on his own Venusaur, which may stop him from setting up his own his own Sleep Powders. Can go for something like another Sleep Powder into this Groudon maybe if needed, but Grimmsnarl gonna stay asleep for this turn, taking that permanent nap on this first turn of sleep. Parting Shot into the Groudon, though, a really great way to lower that attack out of the Groudon, and then allowing you maybe to come back in and get another attack drop or another fake out opportunity, which is, you know, what Incineroar is good at and what it is known for, and allowing possibly to bring in something that can handle this Trick Room and make the most of it a little bit better than, say, this Venusaur, which is not exactly known as a Trick Room Pokemon, but Groudon coming in could be a nice opportunity maybe to get a nice amount of damage. Fire Punch from the Groudon on Joao's side, stopping any more Sleep Powders from coming out. No more status effect on that side, maybe allowing for Fredrik to come in and go for something like some max airstreams later if it needs to. But at this point, too, you're setting up for your own Lunala to come in, trying maybe for Fredrik to fish for that Charizard to come in to go for your own Meteor Beam. But Incineroar comes in instead, gets the Intimidate drop as well, and maybe some nice fake out pressure on the next turn.
So we know from Joao's side, I think he's got the Charizard in the back, and he's kind of setting it up really nicely for it at the moment. Trick Room's really ticking down at the moment. Neither of Pokemon have maxed yet, but it's looking like a really nice option once that Trick Room has gone, because Venusaur's completely gone. So once Trick Room's gone and you're in the sun, Venusaur can't Sleep Powder you. And you can hit the Lunala. Now the Shadow Shield's also broken too, so it can't hit you very hard with the a Max Rock Ball or anything, because probably in the sun you probably just knock it out at this stage, even if the Lunala Dynamaxes. So I think Joao's played this really nicely at the moment, and Fredrik hasn't really made the most of those Trick Room turns to be able to do lots of or take the KOs that he needs to yet, because that Charizard is still looking pretty healthy, unless a particular Rock Group maybe comes out really this turn. But that would be quite the read to make. So we do see the Dynamax probably on Fredrik's end, and it's probably that Groudon.
Yeah, I mean, I would seeing a Max Rockfall right now, I think might be kind of the highlight of my day into a switched in Charizard in Trick Room. You know that it can't protect because it was that switch in. Maybe just trying to at least as well, if you went for something like a Max Quake to try and get that boost and then you target into the Charizard, you do not actually get that effect because it would fail. But Parting Shot from the Incineroar into the Charizard on the opposite side of the field, able to lower that special attack one stage, maybe make that Charizard a little bit less comfortable to stay out on the field like it just switched in for its partner. And, at this point, right, you're kind of waiting, because if it is that Max Quake from that Precipice Blade to try and boost the special defense of the Pokemon on your side of the field for something like a Max Wildfire from this Charizard, and it is, but instead it looks like it's targeting into that Grimmsnarl instead. So Grimmsnarl going to take the brunt of this damage, but it's still not enough for the knockout.
Yeah, good targeting by Fredrik there, and now with a Max Quake boost, it's going to be able to take on any Charizard attacks pretty well. And actually, for his own benefit, the sun is now gone down as well, so Charizard is looking like it's not going to do a whole lot of damage. However, João does have his Groudon in the back, so he's able to bring it back up again, but that does mean he does need to switch it in, and that means Grimmsnarl isn't, say, going for its trick shenanigans to be able to lower the other speeds of things, but Lunala is able to potentially get another Trick Room up here if, say, Groudon targets down the Grimmsnarl and Lunala gets away with whatever Charizard is going with, but it's the Groudon on Fredrik's end is looking really hard to deal with at the moment, especially with the Rock move, and we know the Charizard isn't the Charty Berry either, so it's looking very bulky and something that my money's on Fredrik here, but it's still not over.
Yeah, Groudon switching back in for João, getting that Charizard off of the field with that -1 special attack, getting the Sun back up later, and possibly just hoping that you get your Grimmsnarl knocked out to get your Charizard in for free. Lunala going for a Moongeist Beam, so no Trick Room on this turn, and showing also that it is moving faster than the Groudon as well, just a nice thing to keep in mind. Going into that Grimmsnarl with the Moongeist Beam is enough for the knockout, so at least you're getting it off of the field, you're preventing any more trick shenanigans, you're preventing any Thunder Waves into that Lunala as well. Max Rock Ball from the Groudon going to be targeting into that Groudon, which was that Charizard slot. Only does a little bit of damage, but the nice thing is it will start setting up another bit of chip. So, if this Charizard comes back in, it's going to be taking some chip from the rocks. It's going to be taking some chip as well from its solar power. It's going to be taking some chip from the rocks instead of that solar power chip. But if you're able to go for a G-Max Wildfire into one of these Pokemon, you're also getting onto that Lunala G-Max Wildfire chip and the rock type chip, unless you knock out that Lunala outright.
Yeah, no need to get fancy with Fredrik's end there. Like, if he goes for the Trick Room, Grimmsnarl can potentially outspeed him if he'll play it, so he just nabs the KO on that nice and safely, goes for the safe Rock Fall, and even if, with the switch in, he's got the stand up now, so Charizard's not going to be doing anywhere near as much damage as it would be with the Sun up. So, and he's still got that extra turn of Dynamax to potentially get another Max Quake and boost the special defense of his Pokemon even more so. And we don't know how much bulk maybe this Lunala has, but no, we know Fredrik still has his Incineroar in the back as well to bring in another Intimidate too, so he can even neuter the Groudon's stats a little bit more too. But João does still have a Charizard, and Charizard is a very good Pokemon. So we could see maybe a Max Guard here to take the Rock move, because all the Rock moves, except for Smackdown, I believe, are not very accurate. So it's still all to play for once the Dynamax is over for this Charizard to do the business. But we see a Meteor Beam first.
Yeah, and speaking of inaccurate, right, Meteor Beam is one of those moves that we know to be inaccurate, but it won't even matter if it's going into a Max Guard from this Charizard. You do get that special attack boost, which is great, and this Max Steel Spike targeting into the Groudon on the opposite side of the field will help to boost your own defense from something like a Precipice Blades coming from the Groudon on Joao's side, but a really nice way to prevent this Lunala from getting that damage, that super effective damage onto the Charizard that you would like. And you're taking that Shadow Claw that you saw in Game 1, you're taking it in retaliation, knocking out the Lunala, gonna force in that Incineroar in the back, which will lower your attack. But at least, at that point you still have... It's almost kind of evened out. You have the lowered attack and they have the +1 defense boost, but they also have the the addition to their special defense as well. So both of the Pokemon on Joao's side need to put in a lot of work to try and get enough damage onto the Pokemon on Fredrik's side, even as Groudon's Dynamax ends.
Yeah, and we've just seen the Max Guard on the Charizard, so that is just waiting to be hit by that Rock move. Depending on the Rock move, though, it might not care. Like Stone Edge, it might do. But say something like a Rock Slide or a Rock Tomb, which we've seen in previous games, might not. So we'll have to see what that Max Rock Fall is coming off of here. So Incineroar does have a pretty safe fake out into the Joao's Groudon, because I believe it is Assault Vest, and Fredrik could pretty much know it is based on previous Frenzy Plant damage from Game 1. So it's very much in his court to be able to just hit his moves. But interesting to note, like Incineroar comes in the repeat ball, which has kind of got those arrows that are spinning around, which I love, because that's just exactly what Incineroar does. So very on point Pokeballs here for the Thunderers as well.
Yeah, just consistently a repetition of seeing Incineroar a million times throughout any really tournament weekend or just Pokemon game in general, right? But no fake out this turn. G-Max Wildfire going to be the move of choice into the Groudon on Fredrik's side. Without the Sun, it's not doing as much damage, especially with that solar power as well. But it is going to start adding a little bit of extra chip onto that Groudon. Groudon going for the Rock Slide does connect, not enough to get that Charizard down into the bottom 25%, but it does flinch the Groudon, and Darkest Lariat from the Incineroar into that Charizard is not enough to knock it out, but it's going to get knocked out by the Sandstorm this turn.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the flinch does come out there, but I think, yeah, we've seen consistently Fredrik's Groudon is outspeeding João's Groudon. So I feel like the ball was definitely still in his court there, but like a Precipice Blade to come out there though and potentially hit that Groudon would have just potentially just ended the game there. So a really crucial flinch there, most likely for Fredrik. And like the perfect amount of damage on the Charizard too. So, and seeing the Darkest Lariat with that 5 extra base power on over what many will use as Throat Chop too, may have also made the difference so that Charizard was in the Sandstorm range too. But Fredrik is able to hit his Precipice Blades and gets the KO on João's Groudon, and we're all tied up 1-1 going into a third game, Maeve.
This is my first game 3 in about 2 weeks of commentary, so I am actually stoked to be able to see a game 3 here. Last week we had 4 rounds that went to just for some quick 2-0s. I think we were done in under 2.5 hours of commentary, so I am stoked to have a game 3. I still love seeing the Lunala on Fredrik's side. Was still able to put in work, even if that Moongeist Beam, we didn't get to see it, but it's still just the pressure of it being on the field, I think is really nice to have. But I love from Fredrik's side the ability to just consistently position, right? Bringing that Incineroar in and out was really frustrating. And then also the boost from that Dynamaxed Groudon, I think really were important over time. You know, you did get a little lucky because there was that flinch on the Groudon, but even still, right, you kind of still played to a way that set your end game up to be more successful. And I think that's really all that matters when you're running these teams that are so position heavy and so stat based. So I was really impressed with that. And I was impressed kind of seeing how changing the weather was also a nice thing. You may not have gotten the knockout with the Darkest Lariat, but because it was at least a weather with either rock or even if the sun was up as well, you were still able to get the knockout on that Charizard. And also a piece of information knowing forward, there's no Throat Chop if you want to go for your own parting shot, if that is a move that you are kind of bringing around with your own Incineroar. But Incineroar hasn't really been coming to these games, so I don't know if we will see it.
Interesting leads now here. So off the back of game 2, where you'd expect maybe João to maybe switch up his lead, having lost with that lead, he sticks with the same lead. And Fredrik actually switches to the lead he went in for game 1, which he lost. So, which still just kind of interesting like mindset behind the 2 players here. And it ends up with a unique like lead or like opposing each other. So we have a new interaction here, but we're going straight out. Both players cleaning their moves very quickly here. Thunder Wave from the Grimmsnarl going to paralyze the Venusaur as in game 1 as well. And Thunder's going straight for the Fly to eventually avoid some attacks there. Not wanting to get maybe worn down by that Iron Ball so early on, and the Sleep Powder going straight for the miss. Sleep Powder hitting on the Grimmsnarl this time though, putting that Grimmsnarl firmly to sleep now.
This is just status condition turn 1 as an absolute showcase. The Thunderous, though, going for that Fly does at least show that you're trying to get that Venusaur down maybe to its Focus Sash thanks to a nice strong attack, and then not having to worry so much maybe about getting Sleep Powdered in return. And now that this Grimmsnarl is asleep, you don't have to worry about the Iron Ball on your Thunderous because it's flown. Venusaur brought down to that Focus Sash thanks to the Fly itself, and that Thunderous, of course, showing how fast it is without the sun on the field. So nobody's switching in those Groudons like in that game 1, but the Sleep Powder goes right back into the Thunderous on the opposite side of the field. That Thunderous is not going to want to Dynamax right away like we saw in game 1. Venusaur, though, went for a Sleep Powder into the opposing Venusaur, maybe predicting a switch into that Groudon like game 1. Does not matter thanks to Venusaur's grass typing.
Yeah, so not what Fredrik was hoping for there for João to maybe switch in something a little bit different, but it would have been very risky in front of what the Venusaur was. So João ends up getting a lot out of that turn. I wonder if, I know we've seen Life Orb on this Thunderous, but I wonder if maybe if Fredrik had Protect on his Thunderous, he would have actually gone for that in game 1, I suppose, opposed to the Fly as that kind of defensive play. So, but instead we see that, so I wonder if maybe there's a slight different status move there that we see that potentially could become a max guard but isn't Protect itself. Maybe that Eerie Impulse, maybe that Taunt to potentially shut down some more stuff. But there's the first turn of Sleep for Thunderous, and Sludge Bomb comes out into what was the Venusaur, and the Umbreon is the switch in here. So a very cool Pokemon that we've now seen, and is a very nice switch into what both of Joao's Pokemon have, especially if it's that safety goggles, but it's not. It is the leftovers instead.
Interesting, right? And then the Grimmsnarl went for a foul play into the Thundurus, which is a ton of damage thanks to Thundurus' high attack stat. But I wonder if this means that Fredrik was predicting that João would have brought his own Lunala, and that might have been why he led what he led, keeping something kind of hidden in the back, and that makes you wonder what didn't come, because that means one of the restricted isn't here, right? That may mean that your Groudon did not come if you're trying to not boost up the opposing Charizard on the opposite side, bringing your own Umbreon, trying to maybe help your Lunala, because your Lunala is a really nice answer for the Charizard, but then even still, if you brought your Thundurus, then did you not bring the Lunala because you're able to go faster? So a little bit of a tougher mind game, I think, for João to play through. It might be nicer just to try and get some more information. Thundurus, though, stays asleep for a second turn. Did not get that wake up. Venusaur goes for a sleep powder onto the Umbreon. Umbreon now also being put to sleep, so no chance for Fredrik to put off any offensive pressure on this turn, but it does at least mean that the Umbreon gets that first turn of sleep this turn. Grimmsnarl gets another foul play off onto the Thundurus as well and gets that knockout with a critical hit, but we know that that didn't matter based on the damage output from that last turn. So Thundurus, now that huge threat, is off of the field, and there isn't a lot of great ways for speed control, possibly besides something like a Trick Room from that Lunala in the back.
Yeah, but as you said, mate, we know that there can't be a Groudon and a Lunala in the back there, and as we've already seen, a lot of support Pokemon. So Venusaur is the switch in instead. Joao's definitely being on top here, having got a KO on what is probably like a very decent Dynamax target for Fredrik in his Thundurus. And Venusaur is still, like, it's on 1 HP, but it's still doing so much work. We've had a Sleep Powder, we've had Sludge Bombs coming out, and it's still able, thanks to the paralysis on Fredrik's end, to be able to hit the Venusaur yet again, for maybe to chip it away from that Focus Sash. Grimmsnarl's sitting pretty healthy as well. Can still throw out that trick if it so wants to. So Fredrik really needs to try and position his Growlithe into a way that it's not threatened by this Venusaur and can start to get up those Quakes to potentially take on a Dynamax Charizard in the back for João, which he's been using to great effect.
Yeah, Umbreon takes another turn of sleep here. The Venusaur on Fredrik's side gonna go for a Weather Ball, that normal type, thanks to there not really being any weather in knocking out that 1 HP Venusaur left. Grimmsnarl also going for a foul play this turn. This Venusaur, who had also taken some Sludge Bomb damage from the Venusaur on the opposite side of the field, takes the foul play pretty comfortably, but it does mean that if you've got any strong typing move here, you could get a pretty clean knockout onto this Venusaur that can be so problematic, as long as you don't switch in a Pokemon like Groudon that can set the sun and make it move a little bit faster than you.
And we're looking at João, considering what he's going to bring in here. I mean, if you bring in the Charizard, like, it's looking fairly safe because the Venusaur is paralyzed. You can definitely hit it down now that you've broken the Focus Sash on it, and potentially start boosting from there. Umbreon would be afforded the opportunity of potentially getting a Snarl off if it does end up waking up next turn to reduce Charizard's damage output, and that's probably exactly what Fredrik will need to be able to win the game with his likely Dynamax Groudon in the endgame. But look at the João decides to switch in the Groudon instead here. So that's not going to be able to necessarily outspeed the Venusaur here. So it could be able to go for some extra attacks. But we may see Grimmsnarl go for the Iron Ball just to assure that it can. But a nice switch all the same. So we'll see how the rest of this turn goes, whether Umbreon wakes up as well, and whether it can actually start getting some chip down onto this Groudon, because if that's the main thing that's going to be able to take a lot of the moves that Fredrik's Groudon has as well, if that is his Dynamax of choice.
Yeah, and, you know, Groudon coming in, not too worried about this Venusaur now, as you're going to continue to trick that Iron Ball onto the Venusaur. Unlike that Lagging Tail, you know, it's gonna take effect immediately. Groudon goes for a Fire Punch this turn as well into the Venusaur. Just get that clean knockout. Also, it gives your own Grimmsnarl a Focus Sash, and not entirely sure if that matters all too much, but Umbreon showing its stuff, getting it to wake up on this turn, goes for the Yawn into that Groudon, which I don't think the Groudon's too worried about, right? Because you still have your Charizard in the back, you're not too uncomfortable switching around, and you're going to be able to at least see what Fredrik has in the back as his last Pokemon and see if you really do feel comfortable maybe switching, and if that's kind of the move of choice. And it's Groudon, so no Lunala there, so Groudon trying to be for Fredrik that big offensive threat in the back that he was hiding to make us guess what restricted he had, and Grimmsnarl's got a Focus Sash right now.
It sure does. Now, if you're Fredrik's end, I think you definitely want to start like maxing the Groudon and get some Quake boosts up to be able to take on the likely Charizard in the back, which João has brought to both past games. So if you think you're Fredrik, you're probably expecting it there. However, obviously, as João could switch in his Charizard on either slot to be able to take the Max Quake and like completely with the Max Quake and the boost going along with it. It's a fairly more obvious switch on the Groudon end because it is yawned. but we are not seeing any switches, however. So Fredrik may be able to get this Quake off and potentially help win out this end game. And this Yawn support, I think, is really nice for Fredrik because there's no like absolute way of it getting KO'd even closely with what João's got on his field right now. And if Groudon is staying in here, then that means Groudon's able, on Fredrik's end, can go for a Rock Ball, resets the sun to sand, and if there's any Charizard coming in then, it's not going to do any damage at all. But Grimmsnarl is able to just hang on from this huge Max Quake that's just come in.
Yeah, and I was really hoping it would hang on with the Focus Sash, but instead it hung out with 5 HP. Groudon goes for a Precipice Blades, connects on both targets, does a pretty nice chunk of damage in this Snarl. Not too worried about that Groudon. Groudon going to avoid it as well, but not too worried about getting a special attack drop. Grimmsnarl hangs on with 1 HP, and that is absolutely insane. Gets the special attack drop, but foul play into that Groudon, a nice, strong physical attacker, not loving to take that extra bit of chip damage. And there is no rock setup right now, so no Sandstorm. This Grimmsnarl able to hang on, and Groudon finally goes to sleep.
Yeah, I don't know if actually João wants to keep his Grimmsnarl there, really. Like, I feel like he kind of wants it gone, because now Fredrik can go for another Max Quake, or even potentially say, like, a Rock Fall into the Groudon slot, so you can, like, just KO the Grimmsnarl anyway through when the sand goes down. And then you've got Charizard who has to come in without any sun anymore. So, which could be pretty huge. However, Umbreon does have likely his Moonlight, based on what a lot of Umbreons had that you told me, Maeve. So, like, having the sun up means you can heal a lot more, obviously. But we see the trick come out, and Grimmsnarl gets the Assault Vest, taking that away. So I really like that play from João, because now what Charizard in the back is going to be doing a whole lot more damage. But there is the Rock Ball, potentially coming for a switch, but also setting up that sand. So Charizard is not much of a threat, as much, going into the next turn.
Yeah, I don't think that Assault Vest really helped that Grimmsnarl much with that 1 HP left. Groudon taking another, it's a second turn of sleep here. Umbreon going for Moonlight, but without the sun up, it's going to be taking a little bit less of that recovery this turn. But it's still really any bit helps, right? You know this Umbreon is not running safety goggles, it's running those leftovers. So it is going to be able to take that chip damage from that G-Max Wildfire if that comes out from this Charizard moving forward. So, you know, Charizard does have a lot on its plate that it's got to accomplish for João here, especially if he wants to try and take this game 3. But he at least knows, right, that he can consistently do more damage to the Umbreon. If this Umbreon wants to heal, it's taking a turn to heal, and it can't put out that offensive pressure. It can't go for something like a Yawn into the Charizard, which could be incredibly frustrating. But, you know, Umbreon has the opportunity to go for a Yawn into this Charizard right now because you have a pretty strong opinion that it's going to Dynamax, right? And it needs to make the most of the turns that it's got. G-Max Wildfire is a really nice move to have. You're not too worried about the speeds. You know, at this point, Charizard's still going to be one of the faster things on the field. Umbreon, not exactly the most powerhouse of a Pokemon. It's, you know, it's typically running like Foul Play, but if you're taking a Snarl as well, you want to get rid of that Umbreon early so that it doesn't continuously drop your special attack. And, you know, maybe you can get a little lucky and avoid it like that Groudon did earlier, even though Groudon's not exactly the main target for a Snarl, but it's at least something that you kind of have to be cognizant of, but you're going for a Max Guard instead.
Yeah, so the fairly obvious Max Guard there, because as long as you sort out the rest of the Groudon's Dynamax, you know you can take the Rock Slide in the when you're Dynamax, as we saw in Game 2. But Fredrik doesn't end up going for the read. It does end up going into the Max Guard. Precipice Blades comes out, does a decent chunk of damage, but the Foul Play into the Groudon is doing loads as well. Sand does chip a little bit away here, but going into the next turn now, João will have his Charizard with 2 more turns to Dynamax, and able to take the Rock Slide next turn. So Groudon on Fredrik's end we know is faster than João's Groudon, based on, unless it's been a speed time, Fredrik's been winning every single one. But like, it's probably in range of a Wildfire now. Like, this is a Life Orb Charizard, but we have not seen Protect on it yet, but it's not even revealed.
Yeah, I don't even think it would have been revealed, right? Because it was that Assault Vest that got tricked away, so it probably wouldn't have even been carrying it. So a really nice safe target there with that G-Max Wildfire, which is able to knock out, start setting up some residual damage onto that Umbreon as well. Precipice Blades, though, gonna connect as well into this Umbreon. Does enough to get the knockout as on top of that. So that Umbreon now getting knocked out means that João is able to take this game for Brazil, and a really nice way to kind of play into a slower end game. And once that end game was in a position that you were comfortable with, start really putting on offensive pressure. Hit all your Precipice Blades for one. That's huge. That always kind of helps when you're in an end game. But like you said, that max guard was great because even then you still had 2 turns of Dynamax left. That means you at least had one solid turn without a yawn or without being put to sleep to at least get a nice amount of damage off, even if that Umbreon was able to kind of survive that Precipice Blades.
Yeah, it must be really tempting for João to like switch out his Groudon and like not get put to sleep. But like the actual play there was to just absolutely like take the sleep. You're not doing too much damage. You stall out the Groudon, and what ended up being really pivotal, actually, 1 HP survival on the Grimmsnarl to be able to do that really crucial trick and take away the Assault Vest, which otherwise would have let Charizard survive. So I really like it at the moment. So having had that now, we have the update that Brazil is 7-0 versus Norway now. So which is like pretty astounding. Really strong showing from Brazil, having gotten like 2 pretty convincing wins for the last 2 weeks too. And on the other side, USA versus Sweden are 6-0 too. So not the greatest week for Scandinavia, but still 2 very strong teams, as we've seen from like the previous like year as well. And as you said, Maeve, Norway making the group stages here is still an excellent achievement. And that only means that next year they'll make it to top card or even win.
Yeah, and actually really interestingly as well, Brazil and USA play next week. So those teams are going to have to be fighting it out for seeding because for playoffs, once we start getting into that after Worlds in about a week and a half or so, you're going to have to be worried about your seeding and who you're going to be playing. So both of these teams, they're going to be paying a lot of attention there. It's not going to be like they're just kind of sitting there comfortably throwing Pokemon at the wall and kind of seeing what happens. But they still want to have those great seedings leading up into that playoffs. I know the USA probably wants to make as deep, if not preferably a deeper run into the playoff bracket than it was able to last year. And Brazil is a team that is incredibly talented. We already know a lot of their players are so talented. Gabriel Agati, who we saw do incredibly well at NAIC, I think has a lot with that team that he's working with to put on a lot of pressure in a really nice way for João to get himself on stream and do a ton of really interesting work in a team that we've seen a lot, but it's one of those teams that you see it a lot because it is so good.
Yeah, and Joao's used it a lot as well. He's used it in previous weeks, and you could see why he's using it today. Like he pilots it excellently, saving that Charizard for the end game as well, which versus a lot of other Charizard teams, you may see them just lead it often. So like he playing it in a really nice different way on a Ludon team is really cool to see. And that puts João at 4-0 for like the whole World Cup, which is really incredible too. So he's an excellent player for Brazil's whole team. Fredrik has also still taken a win for Norway's team too, using a variety of teams. So this has probably been a pretty good experience for the entirety of their team as well. Sad to see them go, but congrats to João, Henrique, and the rest of Brazil for taking the win and guaranteeing getting out of their group now. But now it's down to the seeding, as you say, Maeve.
Absolutely. We will be taking a quick break. We still have 2 more rounds of Pokemon to be played today. So do not go anywhere. We will be right back with what is going to be, I think, a really interesting match for our round 3. It's going to be against Switzerland and it's going to be against Chile. So some teams that I know we saw do pretty well last year. And Switzerland has been a team to beat this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so. They've been like really strong. And I think Chile was really strong last year too. I think I'm having flashbacks there. So that's definitely like not made up, I think. So yeah, like stay tuned. 2 more excellent games to come. And we will be right back after the short break.